Are the recently announced Star Wars films already in trouble? Let us take a look at this possibility. Recently, Lucasfilm head Kathleen Kennedy had made a comment that she wants to eventize Star Wars movies, something akin to like a James Bond movie, coming out every 3 to 4 years. Now, I'm not saying this is a bad idea, but there might be something more to it than meets the eye. Recently in London, England, 3 movies were announced. One about Rey Palpatine forming a new Jedi Order. Another is set in the Mandalorian verse that will be directed by Dave Filoni. And the third would deal with the very origins of the Jedi. But this got me thinking, how likely will any of these movies make it to the theater? Now, I say this only because Disney Star Wars does not have the best track record for actually making the movies that they announce.
The Boba Fett movie that was going to be directed by Josh Trank, it was announced after his breakthrough movie Chronicle, but the movie got the plug pulled sometime either during the filming of his version of the Fantastic Four or very shortly afterwards. Also, James Mangold was rumored to be working on a Boba Fett movie. This was eventually adapted to a limited Disney Plus series, Rangers of the New Republic. After the success of The Mandalorian, a number of projects were announced, including a show named Rangers of the New Republic. It was going to star Gina Carano as the badass Cara Dune. Unfortunately, after some ill-advised tweets, Carano was fired by Disney, and the Rangers of the New Republic is very unlikely to see the light of day. The Obi-Wan trilogy was set to be helmed by Billy Elliot director Stephen Daldry. Due to the underperformance of Solo, a Star Wars story, Lucasfilm became very wary of non-Skywalker saga movies. The trilogy eventually found new footing as a limited series on Disney+. The unnamed Star Wars film by David Benioff and D.B. Weiss. Around 2019, it was announced that the Game of Thrones showrunners, Benioff and Weiss, would be directing their own Star Wars movie. In fact, at one point, it was slated to be the first big screen Star Wars project after the 2019 release of Rise of Skywalker. It was theorized that the duo rushed the final season of Game of Thrones to get that sweet, sweet Star Wars money. But with the poor reception of that final season, Lucasfilm had second thoughts on their project. Ultimately, the Double Ds ended up developing IP for Disney Plus's competition, Netflix. Star Wars Episode 9, Duel of Fates by Colin Trevorrow. Originally, the Jurassic World director was set to film Episode 9. No one is exactly sure why he was replaced by J.J. Abrams, but it is believed that Lucasfilm wasn't a fan of the direction that Colin was taking it. I've also heard that Trevorrow had a hard time writing around some of the choices that Rian Johnson had made in The Last Jedi. Recently, Patty Jenkins, David Lindelof, and Kevin Feige have had their respective projects shelved with little to no explanation as to why. Now, a good amount of these projects did find new life on Disney+, but when it's all said and done, Lucasfilm does not have the best record for announcing projects and actually getting them made.
Out of the 3 movies that were announced, I think the most natural one to be the first one out of the gate would be the one set in the Mandalorian verse. Dave Filoni has a lot of goodwill going for him, and by 2025, there are going to be many shows set in that time period. A movie could have a chance to wrap all these storylines up, but of course, that's not what's planned.
The first movie set to be released will be focused on the heroine of the previous 3 films, Rey Palpatine. Good old Rey Palps. This is an interesting move since Rey really wasn't that well liked. I mean, The term Mary Sue has been used pretty liberally, myself included, of course. According to the most recent announcement at Star Wars Celebration in London, the new film will revolve around Rey attempting to form a new Jedi Order. Now, by itself, this does not seem like a bad premise for a movie, but of course, it'll all depend on the execution. Now, of course, one potential obstacle in the way is the perception that Kathleen Kennedy pushes her own political agenda and personal ideology into the projects that she oversees. Now, this can be illustrated when KK wore a t-shirt to a premiere proclaiming that the Force is female. I mean, sure, I guess so, but the Force really isn't female. It's not male. It's the Force. Why can't we leave it at that? Also, the fact that Rey Palpatine just seems to be good at everything. Now, I'm not saying that a female protagonist is a bad thing. In fact, it's a great thing. Princess Leia is such a great example of a feminist icon. And mind you, this was in the late 70s and early 80s. Princess Leia rarely needed saving, and she was pretty much the smartest person in a given room. Rey, on the other hand, did not have much character development. And Rey might be the smartest person in the room, but that's because all the male characters were dumbed down so she could shine. This is a disservice not only to the male characters, but also to Rey as well. My big concern about the Rey movie is it's just not going to appeal to a wide enough audience. And instead, it will probably be another showcase of Kennedy's personal ideology. A point that kind of illustrates my argument is that this film was originally supposed to be directed by David Lindelof, but he's been replaced by the two-time Oscar winner for documentary short form, Charmin Obaid-Chinoy. Charmin has also directed a couple episodes of the series Ms. Marvel. Oh yeah, while I got you, I just learned that David Lindelof's project would have taken place decades after the last movie. Rey would be considerably older, and he modeled her after Helen Mirren. So he probably wanted Helen Mirren to play an elderly Rey, and that would have been badass. Really, really cool. I mean, could you imagine that? Helen Mirren as Rey? It's too bad. Anyway, back to my video.
One thing that could really help the sequel trilogy is time. Let some time pass between Rise of Skywalker and whatever new movie they want to do with Rey Palpatine. I'll explain, and I'll use the prequels as a guide.
From 1999 through 2005, as the 3 prequels were released, the general opinion at the time was even though the special effects were pretty darn good, they lacked the story and the depth of character that the original trilogy had. Of course, this was not helped by George Lucas's dialogue. I don't like sand. It's coarse and rough and irritating, and it gets everywhere. This even spurned a 2010 hit piece disguising as a documentary named The People versus George Lucas. George sold the franchise 2 years after the release of this aforementioned documentary. But now, as of 2023, the prequels are actually looked upon pretty fondly. One reason is the animated Clone Wars. It filled in some of the gaps and added backstory and other details that the prequel trilogy just didn't touch on. Also, time. Just time. We, as an audience, can look at the prequels now and look past its flaws and even love the movies for the flaws. And quite simply, we appreciate them for what they are, a story that George Lucas wanted to tell. Now, it's possible with enough time and maybe some more supporting content on Disney Plus. Maybe that could happen with the sequel trilogy. It may experience a change of opinion. But at this stage of the game, so soon, having another Rey movie could be a misstep. A better idea, at least in my book, is to move forward with the Mando Universe movie by Dave Filoni. The climate is nearly perfect since there are so many shows on Disney Plus dealing with this exact period of time. It could also be a really good palate cleanser from the sequel trilogy. And most importantly, it would show new and old fans that the universe of Star Wars does not revolve around the Rey character.
Now, of course, beyond Kathleen Kennedy's insistence that the first movie be about Rey, one thing I have to ask is, where is Jon Favreau in all this? Where's his head at?
Is it me, or did this season of The Mandalorian seem different than the previous two? I'm not saying it was bad per se, but it really didn't have the same feel as seasons 1 and 2. It makes me wonder, how much involvement did Jon Favreau have in season 3 of The Mandalorian? This could stem from an internet rumor that people like Overlord DVD have published on their YouTube channel, and that is an apparent beef between the Mandalorian producer and the Lucasfilm president. According to Victor Van Doomcock, yes, that is the name he goes under, Favreau was really angered by Kathleen because she continued to meddle in his shows. Jon's decision to have Grogu join Luke Skywalker at the end of season 2 was essentially undone by the events of Book of Boba Fett, and that was added by Kennedy. Also, there was the firing of Gina Carano, in which Jon had big plans for that character of Cara Dune as a lead in the show Rangers of the New Republic. If I were the head of Lucasfilm, I would take great care to keep Jon Favreau happy. In fact, I would hire a concierge just for Jon. Get Jon anything he needs or wants, no questions asked. I would do this because Favreau has made Star Wars relevant after the events of the sequel trilogy. And even though the consensus isn't 100%, it has a much, much higher approval rating than pretty much the whole sequel trilogy, especially after Rise of Skywalker. But as we all know, I am not in charge of Lucasfilm. Kathleen Kennedy is in charge of Lucasfilm. And her method is decidedly different. Speaking of Kathleen Kennedy, a factor that could come into play doesn't have to do with Star Wars at all, but it is a Lucasfilm property, and of course I'm talking about Indiana Jones and the I'm too old for this shit. Kennedy is a producer, and she has devoted a lot of time and energy to this film. Currently, the budget for the Dial of Destiny, that's the actual name, but I like mine better, is coming in at around $300 million. This is due to the expensive de-aging process, injuries to star Harrison Ford, and of course, the COVID-19 pandemic, which pretty much shut down all of Hollywood for a while. At this price point, Indy 5 will have to clear at least $800 million. And really, it would be a lot better if it hit the $1 billion mark. This is a huge ask for the 5th movie of a franchise that doesn't have Fast or Furious in the title, let alone a film that has an 80-year-old lead actor. Some speculate that depending on the success of this film, it could affect Kathleen Kennedy's position within Disney. I'm not sure if that'll be the case, but if this movie does underperform, it could really affect the release schedule for future releases of Lucasfilm, and that does include Star Wars and the Rey Palpatine movie. Worst case scenario in my book would be that Disney loses faith in Lucasfilm and all announced projects are pushed back. After a while, a new lineup of movies, or even the same lineup of movies just repackaged, will be announced, and the process will start all over again. Or, best case scenario, Disney doesn't renew Kathleen Kennedy's contract, and either Jon Favreau or Dave Filoni takes the top spot. Yeah, there'll be a delay still, but it'd be kind of worth it.
We'll have to see. And of course, with the current Writers Guild strike, that could set back Star Wars movies even more. But of course, those are just my opinions, and I would love to hear yours. Feel free to express yourself in the comment section. And as always, fare thee well, my friends, and take care. Cue the music.